The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to the graduate student webinar hosted by the Jackson Scholar Network and UCEA, transitioning mindsets from graduate student to potential faculty colleague. We're really excited to have you all here today, and we wanted to tell you a little bit about why we started the webinar series. We wanted to have a way for students not only have an opportunity to interact with faculty in the field, but also have a way for them to touch back on resources that we can put on the website for them to use for later use. So today we thought we would start with really having you think about what it looks like to transition into the professoriate and all of the things that you might not have thought about as you're transitioning or as you're going to ARA, like what does that mean in terms of thinking as a potential colleague for the people that you're going to be with there. And I know when I was a doc student, I really didn't know what to expect. And you'd go to the conferences and you'd leave and you'd think, man, I wish I had known this before I had gone there. And when I work with doc students now, the same thing happens over and over again. So in order to help students think through a little bit more what they would give in terms of advice, we reached out to a couple of new faculty members who have just gone through this experience several times, I'm sure, at AERA and CEA, and we asked them to speak to you about what they wish they had learned earlier about navigating AERA and what they learned about transitioning into faculty positions since they've graduated. So today, we have with us Dr. Christina Brzica from University of Georgia. Georgia State, I'm so sorry. Yeah,
it's
I
okay.
even have it written. And Dr. Brzica was involved with Graduate Student Council when she was a graduate student. And we have Dr. Julia Mahfouz from University of Idaho, not Idaho State. And she was a Jackson Scholar. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Danny, who has a little bit of a warm-up for you.
Sorry, whenever I click something, we lose the screen. But we do want you guys to kind of take a moment and reflect on why you're here. There's something about this journey that you're on that made you want to attend this webinar. And we do have some scholars here that are going to share their experiences, and hopefully we're going to answer a lot of your questions. But to help us get started, we want you to take a moment and maybe in the question section on the control panel, the sidebar there, provide one question, something that you hope that we can answer today, something that's on your mind, something that perhaps is causing you a little bit of anxiety as you go through this experience. Okay, so go ahead, take a few moments and do that for us.
How do you get to the chat bar, Dan?
So on the right, it should say like webcam questions, and you can click on questions over there on there's a little arrow. Do you guys see that? Marcy, they're able to see that as well, correct?
Found it. Sorry.
Okay. I see Angel Miles Nash has provided, I think, a comment. Maybe there's a question afterwards. Okay, we have two so far. Okay, it's working.
Yeah, Danny, Sage Malden is my doc student who's using mine because we're in here watching together. So I'm off to the side now.
No worries. I assumed he was authorized. I wasn't going to call security or anything.
Unsafe.
No, I just wanted you to know his name.
That's a question. Okay.
Okay. Just to confirm, can everyone see the questions?
I cannot.
You cannot? Okay.
No.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll moderate these questions for us. We'll let you guys do your presentation, and then at the end we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. Anything that I feel hasn't been answered, I'll go ahead and pull from this pile of questions. Okay?
Sounds great. Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome. All right.
Go ahead,
So
Julia.
who would like to get us started? Anyone want to? Julia, you want to go first?
Yeah, I could start. And I would like to start first with saying thank you to Holly, Danny, Marcy for organizing this and making this happen. And I hope that it would be informative. And if you have further questions, you could definitely ask Christina and I further questions via email. And I guess Danny will add our emails at the very end if needed. So as Holly's just said, navigating AERA, and even especially when we are at the stage where you're a graduate student and heading to becoming a faculty, and this whole mindset of changing from being a student, how you think about just networking, to the idea of being a colleague with others seems to be very overwhelming and different in many different ways. So I guess before I start, I could say that it's normal to be overwhelmed. It's normal to feel like there's so many things to do. But before I could start with anything that has to do with details about that, I could just say that you should take it easy. Make sure that you plan your ARA way ahead before going. And when I say that is just start from the very beginning by looking at the program. And I guess that is going to be out tomorrow. Let's hope so. Fingers crossed. And then and then what you could do is highlight first the sessions that pertain to the topics that you're interested in. And that doesn't mean that you have to go to all of them. Even if you have 4 or 5 maybe presentations per day that you feel like they are very exciting and very interesting, there'll be time for you to communicate with the people who presented later on. My advice is to go just for one, because the major point of you going there is to connect with people. This is the time for you to collaborate with others. This is the time for you to network so that people know who you are, what your work is, and for you to understand whom are potential mentors that for the future, who are people that you would like to collaborate with for the future, and where in what capacities that you might be interested in working on, or even volunteering and collaborating. Christina?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to echo what Julia said. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. So much of my growth as a faculty member has really come from the start working with Graduate Student Council for UCEA, working with Clark Scholars, mentors, really generous faculty mentors. And so I think it's a really exciting time when you are sort of heading into the faculty life in terms of starting to build your network, who are not just going to be collaborators, but they're going to be your friends, right? These are people that you are going to see year in and year out. And it's really an opportunity, but it can also be an overwhelming opportunity, right? And like Julia said, looking at a ARA program catalog and trying to narrow down like where you're going can be overwhelming. And I think one of the things that it's like sort of this debate, do you go to the presentations of people that you read and cite, or do you go to the panels and the presentations that are the most compelling? And I think that I've come down on 2 different ways on that. So sometimes I want to talk to somebody, and if they're presenting at a session, I will go to that session because I've been reading their work, thinking about their work, and that's a way to meet somebody whose work has influenced me and my work. But then also other times it's just that this is a new topic and there seems to be this panel that's focusing on this area, and so I'll go to that topic and panel. But I think planning is so important, and I have a rule that in the beginning, I used to try to go to every session, like, back to back to back, and now I don't. ARA is such that you can't actually go to every session and meaningfully absorb what it is and engage with people, right? I think even very extroverted people may have a hard time doing that, right? And so particularly if you're an introverted person, it can be super overwhelming. And so planning in breaks and time where either you're alone and sort of able to reflect on what you're watching or learning about and thinking about, but then, or having time with your friends, right? Your colleagues, grad student friends, so that you can have just a casual low-key lunch or dinner where you don't feel like you're trying to like talk to somebody new and have all of that tension. So it is a big difference, and sort of thinking about how do you transition into the faculty life. It's also recognizing that you have a lot to offer, right? So you're coming into these ARA, but also into your institutions with a lot to offer and your own set of expertise. And so I think that's another big thing that I want to stress, because I know that myself, sometimes I would feel like, oh, what do I have to offer these people? And you know, it feels kind of overwhelming when you look at somebody's CV and it's like 40 pages, but really it's, everybody started from where we're at right now, right? And sort of in that moment, we're building our building blocks really in our network. So I'll stop there and see if we have questions and sort of where we want to go more deliberately.
Just let me say before, as a strategy, that I just like to let you know about my experience when it came, and I found it very successful at the very beginning when it came to ARA, is that ARA could be something 1 year and could be a totally different thing for you the second year. So one time it could be just because you wanted to network with people and get to know more people. Another time could be to find a job. Another time it could be to collaborate. So it depends on what you want. So what I do is usually when before the start of the ARA is set a goal. Like, why am I going there? Am I going to because I want people to know me, or is it because I want to volunteer and be collaborative and try to set myself as a critical person in the field, or is it more about networking? And I'm just like skimming through very quickly the questions that you have here. One things that I've done is before, as I said, is highlight the sessions that I want to go to. Highlight the people whom I want to meet, especially even if you don't know them, if you're interested in them, people who are huge, big stars in academia that you really want to meet, just highlight where they are. Even maybe schedule meetings beforehand, like a week before, just contact them via email and let them know that you'd like to have a coffee with them, and write certain questions for them. So one question could be one question. It doesn't have to, you can't overwhelm them also with so many different things. One question could be, how do I plan my research agenda? Another question could be, how could I be helpful to UCEA or be an integral part in the graduate student council? Any kind of one question where they could help you, and from there they get to know you and see your face, know what you can do, what you're capable of. Another thing is that I found very important is what I did is I basically went to my own mentor and told one of my mentors that I need to meet people. And being an introvert, he basically led me. So it was like a group of people going with him all along, and he would introduce us to all these different people that we would like to meet. So this is one thing that the faculty could do, is ask their graduate students if who would like to, I guess, meet, and then have them as the person who would introduce you to these people. Another thing is set time for editors, although this may sound very weird, and at that time I felt that like it was not only overwhelming but also awkward. Like, what do you say? What do I have? I have nothing to say. I don't have even a paper to present. I don't even have a paper to show them that I would like to have it at their journal. But just going there and tell them about the kind of research that you do. In this way, they would tell you what they're interested in, what they're looking forward for, especially when it comes to special issues, what gaps there are in the field, and they're looking at certain topics that they're interested in, or even gear you to other journals that might be also interesting. And this way you get introduced to all this world of publications that you maybe you're not aware of at the very beginning as a graduate student. Another part that I found very interesting is it's not only that mentors are important, it's just to think beyond that. Is when you are a faculty, these people are going to either support you without you being there present. So they will talk about you without your knowledge. And this is very important. So you have to build that. These people, mentors, you need to think about mentors as people who would be writing you even letters of recommendation or support for grants. So you need to meet people in your field. It is important for you to have mentors because they will be reviewing too the work. If you're on a tenure track, they'll be the people who would be talking about the work that you do. So the more you're out, even if you get out of who you are, as if you're a person who doesn't like to talk about himself or herself, just try to have this kind of elevator pitch where you could talk about your research, even in one sentence, or just like strands. This is the kind of research that I do and I'm interested in. And then just ask them another question. Just ask whoever you're talking to a question about their research, and in this way, some kind of conversation would get along. Yeah, let's go for, I guess, the questions. I don't know.
I just wanted to jump in. I think that it's something that's really important, particularly for folks who are going onto the tenure track, which it sounds like many people may be thinking about, in the sense of, at these conferences, this is where you meet the people who will be writing your tenure letters, right? And so it's important to know that and have sort of like, I started early on a list of people who had said like they really liked my presentation, they liked a paper that was published, anything like that, because come year 5, right, which comes really quickly, you may not remember all these people, but they know you and they know your work and you've seen them. And so that way you have developed a list of people who have expressed interest and knowledge of your work. And that means that they're more likely to write you a letter for your tenure, which is always a tricky process. I think the other thing about the mentor is to realize that no one person can be everything to you, right? And this is something that comes from the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. It's a great center that really has helped me in terms of transitioning from grad student to faculty member and thinking about what does it mean to be a faculty member. And one of those things is thinking about we are going to have different needs as you transition into faculty life, right? And I think this is why the Jackson Scholars, the Graduate Student Councils, all the Clark Scholars, the Boyd Workshop, the Mentoring Workshop, there's a lot of different mentoring options and workshops, and I would say attend them and meet these different people who are there and have been in your same position and able to kind of guide you along in that process. And in that way, kind of, I also be systematic about it, like Julia said, right? Kind of thinking about what do you need in these moments. And the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity actually has a mentor map, right? And they talk about like listing out all of the different types of things, questions that you have about faculty life. I saw one of the questions was thinking about research agendas, right? And so thinking about who has like these strong, clear research agendas and sort of maybe seeking those folks out and asking how did they develop that? But I want to talk about that research agenda question more later. But I think in that way, sort of recognizing like who's had a successful grant writing, right? Who's gotten a lot of grants, seeking them out and finding out like what were their strategies to this process. I think in that way, you can kind of say, these are the role models, right, that I want to learn from, and then you can be intentional because AERA, UCA brings a lot of people together, and these are your opportunities to go and meet them and learn from them, right? And then the other thing is the Jackson Scholars, I know they have all sorts of workshops on this. The Graduate Student Council for UCA has these types of workshops that are all geared specifically to supporting the transition into faculty life. So I'll stop there, but we can questions or other things.
So the pre-conference is very important for graduate students. Make sure that you attend that. I guess it's even more important than the others because these are geared towards graduate students. So I guess my advice is to attend these at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions in the chat that we haven't answered yet? Let's take a quick look.
So with the research agenda, there's one question about being all over the place, which was, I guess, I don't know if Christina was the same, but I was also all over the place. I had so many ideas, I didn't know how to even narrow down what I do or who I am when it comes to my research identity. So what I did is I met with different people. So you meet with other graduate students, ask them about their research agenda to see how they craft and how they even say it and how they project their agenda and who they are. Talk to others and ask them about how they created their own agenda and how they started from the very beginning, how they ask them to talk about their own story, how they started, where they started, and where they are right now. Or just ask them about, there's one clue maybe that's something that is important, is because we have the annual reviews after when you become faculty, and this is when it is important for you to talk about your research identity. So it might be interesting to talk to first year faculty or second year faculty or even third year faculty who are working on these, who have I think a better idea of who they are when it comes to their research. You could ask them how they formulated it, how they and ask them to share. There's nothing wrong with asking to share. I remember that Christina shared with me her own research agenda, and we talked about it, and to kind of set the strand. And the more you speak, and even the more you even coach it in words with others, the more it becomes something that you understand in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want to jump on this as well, because I think this is one of those really big questions. And I think your research agenda is something that is constantly, like, it is not a static thing, right? But there are these themes that are kind of linking your interest, I imagine. And so, like, I know when I graduated, it was like you could see I had a paper, I had an article about teachers and school leaders' relationships. And then I had an interest in school boards and immigrant students' feelings of belonging, and how did that all connect together. And it's really through the conversations, right, with friends, colleagues, mentors, that it became clear my research agenda is all centering about relationships within schools, right, and how those relationships facilitate the democratic mission of schooling, right? And so over time, that became really clear, but in the beginning, that was less clear. And I know that feels unsatisfying, right? Like I felt very unsatisfied with that sense of like clarity around what does it mean? What's my research agenda? I have all these interests. How do they all link together? But it's, you know, sort of like by doing the work, you figure out the work, and that is not an easy process. It's really messy. Sometimes you end up doing things that are not as perfect, and that's not everybody's process. I will say I know friends and colleagues who have come in very clearly with a research agenda about X, Y, or Z, and they have stayed focused on that. But that's not the way my brain works. That's not the way I think. And so honoring that is my process has been really helpful, and then allowed me to kind of expand. So yeah, I think research agendas evolve, right? They are not static, and they will continue to grow. And I will say that at Georgia State, I've been very fortunate to have faculty colleagues, more senior, who have shared their review packet materials. So for the annual review, so I have a good sense of what's required. For the third year review, which I just submitted, they've shared what that looks like, and the tenure dossier, right? And so asking people who are a couple of steps ahead of you to share their materials is something that you can definitely should do. It's really, I think, key. So, and then also having other people read your materials, right? Always kind of coming back to that mentor circle of who else could look at your material and give you feedback. Because I think other times, you know, just like we learn best in conversation, we learn by other people looking at our work and thinking about our work. So this isn't an isolation. This is not a process of isolation.
And it is okay if you don't have a full-fledged, well thought of kind of research agenda. Just take your time and just say what you have, and people would help you by connecting you with others, connecting you with other ideas, maybe letting you know about the different aspects that could ground the research that you do. So it's okay if this is what is happening too.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I for one hate that question when they ask me like, "Oh, what are you interested in?" It's almost embarrassing. One quick technical thing: if you want to send a chat message to everyone, make sure you change the to bar from organizer to everyone in the chat room. And I do have
I'm having a hard time with that, just FYI. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you click on the little arrows there, does it give you options like for everyone or like private?
Yeah,
message?
I don't see all as an option there.
All?
That's the problem. I see organizers, etc., but I don't see all.
Okay.
Yeah,
Marcy?
me too.
Marcy, are you there? Okay.
It's
Well,
okay. We can kind of work through that later.
I do have a question. I'll just go ahead and interject. Someone that's thinking about presentations in the near future. Do you have any advice regarding like how to start or where to start? You know, how big to kind of what kind of goal should I have? Am I thinking poster? Am I thinking something else? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Julia, do you want to go first or shall I?
You go.
Okay, so in terms of presentations, I think it really does depend on sort of what the project is and sort of how far along it is in the process, right? So for me, typically I would think of a project if it's in the early conceptual phase where I've started doing some of the research, I've started doing some initial data analysis, I will think about it as a roundtable or a poster presentation because I really want to get feedback, right? This is really much more feedback. Whereas the paper presentations that I submit to conferences are formed, right? They're not maybe fully formed because it's still going to be a conference paper and I'm still working through it. But I have done the data analysis. I have my theoretical sort of guiding frameworks. And so that's kind of how I decide between whether I submit a presentation that's a paper presentation or a roundtable poster presentation. Is that the question you were asking, Danny, or was there something else you were asking?
No, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
if you want feedback, right, a roundtable is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Julia, what are your thoughts?
It's important to keep in mind. So, like, so I've been a program chair at AERA, and you get to choose what you would like to be considered for. You don't get to choose necessarily where you'll land.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're only willing to take a paper slot, you limit your ability to present because your options are, so for any division or SIG, the number of submissions they get dictates the number of paper sessions they're allotted, roundtables they're allotted, poster sessions they're allotted, what have you. So, for example, if they're allotted at like a smaller SIG, like Leadership for Social Justice was allotted last year, like 4 paper sessions, and I think 4 roundtables, 4 poster sessions, where we do these different things, and you can decide how you want to do them. So when we're going through submissions and we get the numeric scores and rank orders, if we have a graduate student who has submitted and they said they'll only take a paper session and they're lower in the rank order, they've then eliminated themselves from consideration because they said they will not take a roundtable or a poster session. So when you're submitting and you're trying to just get your work out there, now you might think that it's somehow less prestigious to get a poster session or a roundtable, but it's better than not being accepted at all. And so a number of students don't think about that. You can't be as selective. And sometimes I prefer roundtable sessions for my own work because I like the interaction.
I completely agree, Holly. And I always check all of the boxes, but like in my head, if I have a paper, less developed paper, it's definitely roundtable / presentation.
Right.
Yeah,
no,
and I completely agree.
And it communicates. So even this, this is so not my panel, but I think it also communicates humility, right? Like if you'll only take a paper session, right, and then by accident, one of the reviewers for your paper happened to end up where you're at, and they're like, I totally reviewed that paper, and that's the person who thought they were too good for, I don't know if it happens, but it might.
And I should add that sometimes paper sessions are overwhelming in the sense of preparation time and all. So sometimes even just having the poster where you know exactly what you're going to talk about, and even a roundtable, which is a little bit low-key because you have these interactions and feedback from others, it might be definitely a good idea. Sometimes even a better idea if the goal for you to go to AERA or any other conference is not only to present your work, but also to network with others. So So sometimes sometimes I'm happy that I get the like, let's say, the poster session too. So yeah. And it's always important. I'm just trying to answer one of the questions regarding, just to go back to the research agenda, how to make it stronger. I guess one of the tools that I've used is diagrams, and I felt like diagrams were extremely important, because although I was all over the place, where you could set all the things that you've done when it comes to research or the interest that you have, and try to find commonality through the diagrams, has helped me in understanding how I want to move forward, or what my research identity is all about.
You're muted.
There's a dog here, and I'm worried that he's going to start barking. There's a great question about job talks. Someone wanted you to share your experiences with that, and maybe some tips.
The job talk. So the very first job talk for me was, so I was advised to go for a job talk for a place where I was not as interested in, but just to try. So I applied to different places where I had this job talk where I got to at least present at a place where it was more of like a practice for me. It is extremely important to practice with your colleagues. As in other graduate students, it's extremely important to practice with your mentors or your faculty at your own institution. And it is important for you to practice with yourself if you can. So if you can practice with the recorder and just hear yourself, because sometimes we're more critical than others, it is extremely important. Another aspect when it comes to the job talk, and I'm definitely ready to share mine, the PowerPoint that I had, it's important to start with something that is a personal story. Like, start with something that, why are you here? Why are you doing the thing that you do? Why do you want this job? So start with a good story that brings, and it's a genuine story, of course, something that shows that why you're doing what you do is important to you, and that's why you want to move forward with it. And it is also important to talk about the dissertation work that you do, but also how you are going to, from that dissertation, move to other aspects or other kind of research, what other things that you've done. If you've done some kind of, like, if you were on grants at your institution, mention them at the very beginning. So you could start with the personal story of why you are here, then go to the idea of what you've done at the institution other than the dissertation work, present your research, and then how you are going to move forward with your research. And here the diagram could be important. And then how you would be beneficial or helpful, or how the institution that you have selected to be part of would attend to your needs, and how you would contribute to that institution. That's very quickly in a nutshell, I guess. But I could definitely, I'm more than happy to share my PowerPoint that I had.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Julia said. I think it's so important, that personal story of who you are, because part of this is, like, once you get to a job talk, once you're giving a job talk and you're on campus, you've been vetted, right? People have already read your materials, looked at your letters of reference, and now it's a matter of personal fit, right? Like, how do you fit into this institution? And so I think that personal story of who you are, why you do the work that you do, is so important. But then it also grounding your work and sort of showing the faculty members there that you are a capable colleague, right? This is a job that you're going to be their future colleague. So you want them to be like, I would think this person would work well here, right? And so really in the job talk, your job is to show that, coming back to the research agenda, right, which is not fully formed, but to show that you have a trajectory. So what happens after the dissertation? And I think that's something Julia and I were talking about a little bit before we actually went. We were talking about sort of how do we move from dissertation to your next project, and how do you start publishing off of your dissertation? And we can certainly talk about that more later. But I think that when you go for your job talk, if your dissertation is going to be your major big project, right? Unless you've done a postdoc, in which case you might have 2 projects. But I would say be aware of the time limit, stick to the time limit, give people chance to ask you questions, right? You don't want to take up the entire whatever period it is. And your search chair will be able to give you that information, right? How long you'll have to talk, how much time they'll have for questions, because the questions is really a chance for them to see you interact. And I think that's, the job track is important, but how you respond to their questions is equally important, I would say, maybe more so, because this is really where you have a chance to show them that you can interact with people who ask you sometimes tough questions about your research in a collegial way, without getting defensive and sort of shutting people down. And so I would say thinking about the practice, and then make sure you stay on time, and have your friends, mentors, colleagues ask you these questions, because other people will ask you questions, and that's not a bad thing, right? We grow from the questions. It improves our thinking and our research. And so, yeah, thinking about that.
So we do have another great question, this one from Dr. Barnett. What would you say to faculty while students are in graduate school? How do you get them ready for AERA and for basically a faculty position?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I could talk from my experience, I guess, at Penn State, is that so I guess we were privileged with a lot of mentors and support there. So one thing that one of the faculty, or I guess as a department, what they used to do is have a list of all the presenters, graduate students as well as faculty, just to support. So faculty could go and support the graduate students by attending these presentations. Another one is to introduce the graduate students to other scholars around, especially if you know that they are on the job market and there's a vacancy, like there's something that they're looking for. There are some job positions that they're looking for critical people. What else? I think these are like very critical in that sense.
Yeah, I think the socials is also important, like having faculty act as bridges, right? And connecting people. So if you have a graduate who you know is interested in this, and you know another person from another institution is interested in the same work, that's where a really great natural bridge connection is. And so I think also thinking about how can you mentor them into presentations, right? The other thing that we did, so Julia and I were both at Penn State. The other thing we did was have practice presentation sessions, right? So you could present in front of friendly faces, basically. And so it's not so unnatural to present then to other colleagues. And then I would suggest thinking also about supporting people in seeing that their work is worth being presented. I think sometimes, I know with grad students I've worked with at Georgia State, there's a sense that they may not be like, I don't know if this is necessarily worth being presented. It's like, yeah, that's a really interesting paper. You should be presenting it. And so helping them even just formulate and start submitting proposals to these different conferences. I would say UCEA, ARA are great conferences, but they're also smaller conferences that might be more regional. That's also a nice venue that's friendly. It's often cheaper, right, in terms of location and getting to, but just gives you an opportunity to practice presentations. I know that one of my mentors, the first year I was at Penn State, she had said, but you're going to be presenting with me on this paper. And so in that way, it was just like, go, right? So I do think that's important.
And I should add something that is also based on what you said, that there are some smaller conferences that are extremely important. One of them is the CSLEEE, which is the Values and Ethics Conference that comes in conjunction with UCEA. So it's basically, I think, November. So it's like 2 days before the UCEA. So it's very important. I feel like it was also very critical for me, because when you present at these smaller conferences, you would get the chance to present, first of all, and be able to attend both conferences at the same time. So this is an excellent opportunity. So, and this is happening, I guess, also in November, where they're setting the CSLEE conference along with UCA are happening at the same time. So it's very important. And I encourage all graduate students to participate, because there are also a lot of mentorship that are happening there. Something else is that I thought of. Oh, and I think it's on Wednesday night and all day on Thursday before UCA. Just wanted to let you know. Another aspect that I believe was important, or was important for me, is that one of my mentors, when we were at the conference, what she used to do is have me introduce me to others, but also continue with the conversations with these people around, so that I could learn what kind of subjects and how I could say things, or what kind of topics I could bring up to with others, and just to make it easy when it comes to conversations, that I thought is important. There's a question that if you are on the job market this year, how do you recommend using your time at ARA? So, do you want Christina to go?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I actually learned post job market process was how appropriate it is to actually reach out to people who are at the institutions that you're interested in. So if you are applying for a job, or you know, it's totally appropriate for you to reach out to other people who are at that institution and find out either status of job, find out more about the institution itself, find out about what it is like to work there. And this feels, I feel like as a grad student, I would have felt this was incredibly awkward, but now having been on the flip side, it is part of this process is to reach out to people who are at the institution. And so if you have a friend of a friend who's at an institution that you're interested in, emailing that friend and asking them to make a connection for you is totally okay. Because it helps both the people who are on the job search committee, right, to know that you're serious and that you, but it also helps you to find out, do you actually want to be at this institution? Does this institution have the type of culture that is conducive to your success as a faculty member? And I think that it's oftentimes portrayed that we are sort of looking for these jobs and wanting these jobs, but it's also you're interviewing these people as well, because you're uprooting your life, many cases, moving new places. And so really learning about the place that you're moving to is going to be crucial. And one of the ways to do that is by meeting with the people who are working there and finding out about them, and if these are colleagues that you want to continue to work with, right? So yeah, I think that's one thing that I've learned recently as a faculty member that I wish I had known maybe earlier as a grad student. So some wisdom from beyond.
I could echo Christina's advice by saying that you could make ARA just for the job market for you. So as Christina has said, do your research before. Know who is presenting there, whom from the people from wherever you have applied, like to the jobs that you've applied. Get to know the faculty. Look at the research that they do. Set time with them, ask if you could meet with them and talk with them. And in this way, you would understand and know if they're also looking at something that you are, like sometimes the research that you do is not compatible with what they're looking for. And by meeting with them, you would know exactly what they're looking for too. And you'll know if this is something that you are interested in or not. So you could make the whole ERA is just meetings with these critical people, and the more they see you when you get, let's say, to the whole interview time and you go to their institution, these people would be also critical, because they are the ones who would be supporting and will be asking you these questions during the job talk to help you in getting the job. So it's very important to do that. Yeah.
And the other thing I'm going to jump in here, in terms of the question about Dr. Burnett's question about how faculties can support grad students in this process, this is also where faculty members can just, praise your grad students, the ones that are on the job market. Let other colleagues know that they're on the job market. Let them know that they're going to be coming to the job market. They may know that there's going to be a position coming open at an institution or whatever. And I think that faculty really can help in that way. And I know that several of my mentors did that, where they were kind of pulling me along and saying, oh, she's going to be on the job market. And so that was really helpful, particularly for myself, who I didn't feel like I could do that myself. But yeah, that's.
Someone wanted to know if by any chance you had some, advice on industry versus postdoc.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a really good question. I think in terms of thinking about how to make those decisions, I think I've always been sort of guided by look at people's careers, right? Look at people who are 10, 15 years ahead of you and see what type of career they have. And is it what you want, right? Now, I think the other really important caveat here is that the people that you're working with most closely at your current institution may not be the models that you want to look at, right? Because their job, their satisfaction, their like whatever it is, may not be the people you want to careers you want to have. But I think it's important to like look around the and this is what a conference is really good for. Look around the conferences and find the people whose work you're reading anyway and see, are these the type of people that you would want to be working with and to likely become, right, as you're kind of moving in this career trajectory. And so I think find the people that you admire and see where they're at and what their career path was and ask them about it, right? Like, how did you choose to go into a postdoc versus how did you choose to go into industry? Conferences often bring together people who are in both, right? So who are like in nonprofits, other places. Yeah.
So I feel like at this stage, one has to be very flexible and open to all the opportunities that may come, because you never know what, I mean, it's always the case, right? In life, you never get the chance of we plan things and then things go just exactly opposite, right? So just being open and flexible and accept whatever comes your way. Just be open to these opportunities and different things would come.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some other great questions here. If you're working on your dissertation, should you be worried about publishing? Should you be doing both at the same time?
Yeah. So I think that it's actually interesting because we just had this conversation at a faculty meeting I was at this morning about sort of publishing as a grad student. I think that you should be thinking about publishing. Dissertation, and Julie and I were talking about this as well a little bit beforehand, about establishing sort of your trajectory, right? So it's hard sometimes when you're writing your dissertation to think about taking out a little piece of your dissertation and publishing it, unless you have one of those 3-chapter dissertations, which is a really interesting 3-article dissertations. But I think the other thing is that you should be thinking about publishing from the time you start in graduate school and seeking out those opportunities, whether it's a book chapter, whether oftentimes I know people start with a book review, right? Which seems like a more easily sort of accessible, where you're doing the reading anyway, you might as well review the book and have a publication. But also thinking about working with your mentors about publishing with them, doing work with them on their research, and publishing, because I think it is important in order to be competitive on the academic job market now to have at least 1 publication, 2, etc. Publishing from your dissertation may be hard to do. I think for me it was really hard to do. I'm still publishing off of my dissertation data, and sort of it takes a while to disentangle the sort of what seems to for me was a really big story, and so kind of winnowing it down into a couple of articles, it takes some time. And so I think I did not have a chance to publish off of my dissertation while in grad school, and that's okay. But I did publish with my mentor, and that's, I think, where faculty members are really key. And so finding faculty members who are doing work, who want to work with you, because again, you bring a lot to the table as well. And so remembering that you have important contributions to make. So, Julia.
I truly echo Christina's advice too. And I could say, unfortunately, while I might get, or I was told before, it depends on which institution you want to go to, or whether you want to go even to the whole faculty track. But unfortunately, I guess publishing is important, and this things have become, I mean, the whole even job market has become very competitive, and having some publications doesn't harm at all, and it is extremely important, even for some, if you're even interested in tier 1 institutions or even tier 2 institutions. yes, as Christina has said, do be involved. It doesn't have to be from your dissertation. It doesn't have to be something that is you don't have to be a first author even, but at least be involved in any kind of publications with your mentors, or even be on a grant. That might be also important, because even if you do the labor work and you are just on that grant, it would show that you learned how the grant process is and how you disseminate this information into publications, so they understand that you could do that, and you have the capability of even emulating it if needs be afterwards. But publications are important, and you should be even always working on when you're working on your dissertation, or at least for me, when I was working on my dissertation, when I was dividing the chapters, I was thinking of how the chapters could turn into publications later on, not now, but later on. And this is what happened afterwards. And there are some data that could come out of your dissertation that might be for the dissertation time, not useless, as in you don't need it, but you could use it later on for a paper. And this is what I'm doing. So far, I published 2 publications from my dissertation. There's one more that could be done. And there are other data, like several data that was from my dissertation. And I had some follow-up kind of interviews from the dissertation, and I'm going to publish from that too. So yes, publications are very important, unfortunately, I guess, for some, and fortunate for others. So yeah.
And I do want to say there was a part of this about applying for a professorship if you haven't published in a journal. And I think, yes, absolutely apply. I think that this is on my CV, I have a section about manuscripts in progress, right? Because it shows that you understand that you will be publishing and that you are working on things. And now, obviously, I think it's important to only list manuscripts that you're actually working on. So, but I think that even if you haven't published anything, applying for a professorship, yeah, continue to apply for the jobs, but show that you understand that publishing is part of the professoriate, right? And so having a section on your CV where you say manuscripts in progress or something like that, or if you've submitted something and it hasn't been published, but it's under review, you can say manuscripts under review. So that's one other thought there.
And we shouldn't forget that there are also the clinical route that you could go to, which is more of being focused, and there's the research route too. So there's nothing wrong to applying to all. So yeah.
Good point.
Well, thank you both so much. Danny, is there more questions?
I think we covered all the questions. The last one I was going to ask, and Christina beat me to it. So great job.
Sorry. Yep.
So we definitely want to thank our panelists. Danny, go ahead.
I was going to say maybe Dr. Brazicha and Dr. Mahfouz can give like a final advice for AERA, final advice for the next step in their journey, and then we can do a little wrap up after that.
Yeah, go for it. Julia, you want to go first?
All I could say is that, again, although AERA may be overwhelming to some, or they may find it that it's too much, especially at the very beginning, if you just plan it and take it easy, as this is just a time for your space that is given for you to connect, to meet different people with different research agendas, to collaborate with others by just having these conversations. So take it easy. Just think of it as a place where you're meeting people. Beyond that, things will be fine. So just take it easy and be strategic. This is extremely important. Just know exactly what you want from AERA. And I believe that if you know, things will go very smoothly.
Yeah, I think I would echo everything Julia said. Being strategic is so important. You have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of brain capacity. We all do, right? So being very thoughtful about where you choose to spend your time, and knowing that, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And AERA is one part of that marathon. And so knowing the people that you want to see and meet, emailing them before the conference, reaching out to sort of the other panelists, and being prepared to give your presentations. Also, business cards. Bring your business cards, right? It seems kind of silly and old-fashioned because we're all on Twitter and LinkedIn and all those other places. But having a business card to give somebody is a really nice way of sort of like, hey, I remember you, you remember me, you can email them and follow up, right? That's the other thing. Like following up is so important. And even if it's just like, it was great chatting with you, here's an article or whatever. I think that's really important to also do, because ARA is the first like meeting point. It's not the last. And so that's part of that marathon thing where you're really developing these relationships over a long term. And this is a relationship, right? So collaborations and collegiality is where it's at. So.
And if you get the chance to meet with these scholars who also their times are very busy at ARA, make sure to write thank you letters afterwards, or even just email them with a thank you for their time and effort for helping you out or reaching out.
Paula, do you
Okay.
want to say something?
Right. So thank all of you for joining us. We're glad that you're here. We have a webinar every month from now until November. With the graduate student development, we do this every year now. We just started. We piloted it last year and it was successful. So we decided to go every month this year. We will not do December or January every year because everyone has to recover from UC. Right. So we will start always by focusing on AERA. So we have Julian Vassalig and Angel Nash will be doing our March 14th webinar, which is navigating AERA. Yeah, I think Angel's on. And that's specifically going to look at tips for presenting at AERA and the different types of sessions and how to think about strategic collaboration and working with people. So it's really picking up from where Dr. Brzica and Dr. Mahfouz's talk here ends. So April 26th, then we have a session on drafting conference proposals. And that is because we know that UCEA proposals, SLE proposals, and AERA proposals will be all coming up due. So that's going to be really helpful for those of you who want to be more competitive and get things accepted, because if you don't have anything accepted, you can't get funding to attend. If you can't attend, you can't network. And if you can't network, you won't get a job. It's that simple. How it works. May 24th, then we have the Summer Scholar, Strategies for Making the Most Out of Your Summer Break, because it's not a break, you're just not paid to work. That's how it goes. And I believe actually we have Monica Jimenez leading that one, and she has not yet said who the co-presenter will be. June 21st, just to put this one on your docket, I have it over here, also going to be a very good one. It's building relationships and conducting research in marginalized communities. And that one is really focused on how to engage in marginalized communities and think about research differently. So particularly if you are not from the community, or if you are particularly from a dominant ethnic group, forget it. Like, so white folk trying to work in communities of color or marginalized communities, can't do the PC thing if it is recorded. And so we have a couple of scholars who actually do engage in this work, and they come at it from a very long, deliberate relationship building process. And so they're going to stress how it is possible to conduct research and do these things well. And then we have a couple of more that'll be coming up, but then as we get into fall, we'll start to focus on CEA and mentoring, and we have our new round of Jackson Scholars coming in, what mentoring relationships should look like.
Sounds like some really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, we always want to hear from graduate students. If there's a topic that you really would love to see a webinar on, let us know, and we can definitely make that happen for you. Okay, and I think we're out of time, and I know your time is valuable, so we're probably going to end it here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a great time. I apologize for any of the kinks. It was my first time using this particular platform. But thanks again, especially for Dr. Mahfouz and Dr. Brzica for helping all of us along our journey, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity, and don't be shy to email us if needed.
Please, you have our email.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great day.
Bye.
Okay, so I think I hit the correct button and we have stopped the recording.
Awesome.